Welcome to today's webinar, Ready for Robotics, addressing the missing T and E of STEM and early childhood education, brought to you by Simple K-12. My name is Lori, and I'm here with Dr. Amanda Sullivan, and we are so excited to have all of you here with us today. Now, this webinar is brought to you free today, thanks to our sponsor, KinderLab Robotics. KinderLab Robotics is the creator of Kibo, a robot kit for 4 to 7-year-olds to build, program, decorate, and run their own robot. Now, based on 15 years of child development research, Kibo is used in 40 countries and proven to help kids learn STEM and get excited about it. Now, KinderLab's teaching materials help integrate STEM elements into a wide range of curricula, including art, cultural studies, and reading. And Kibo requires no screens, keyboards, computers, tablets, smartphones, or IT support. Now, for those of you who are just joining in live, I went ahead and sent out a tweet from our Twitter account. You can feel free to retweet to your followers and invite them to attend today's session. That is free and open to the public. Thanks to our friends at KinderLab Robotics. Just be sure to include this link as well as the hashtag SK12 when you send out your tweet. Once again, that live back channel chat, great place for you all as attendees. You can take notes and chat with one another. And we will have some time for some live Q&A at the end of our session today with Amanda. Feel free to submit your questions through that questions box of GoToWebinar. If you submit your question through the Titan Pad, through the back channel, I may not see it. So if you have a question about the teacher learning community or you have a technical question, I can help you out with that behind the scenes during the webinar today. Otherwise, any questions that you do have for Amanda, we're going to hold those to the end, and we try to get to as many of those questions as possible. Now, just a little bit about our presenter. Dr. Amanda Sullivan is the Manager of Teacher Training at KinderLab Robotics, where she works with teachers on strategies for integrating robotics into their curriculum. Now, she received her master's and PhD in child development from Tufts University, and Amanda also has experience teaching robotics, coding, engineering, and the arts to children in pre-K through 3rd grade. Amanda, it is such a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
I will go ahead and pass the screen to you, so you should see that pop up on your screen.
And how is my audio?
Audio's great, and your screen looks perfect. We're good to go.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. My name is Amanda, and I'm really excited to be here today sharing with you this talk, Ready for Robotics, addressing the missing T&E of STEM in early childhood education. And you've already heard that I'm the Manager of Training at KinderLab Robotics, which basically means that I get to spend my days with awesome educators like all of you, helping them plan curriculum, learning to use our robot, and really being immersed in preparing them to teach with robotics and coding tools in their classrooms. And I'm very passionate about robotics, the arts, STEM, and STEAM, so I'm very thrilled to be here sharing that passion with you today. And since I've already mentioned STEM, let's just jump into the content. So I'm sure you're all extremely familiar with this acronym by now. It stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And if we take a moment to close our eyes and think about what STEM looks and feels like in early childhood settings, we might see something like this. Children investigating weather, the natural environment, plants and animals, or we might instinctually picture kids exploring basic numeracy and math skills like counting, shapes, or puzzles. But what we're seeing is that it's very easy to picture fun, engaging, and developmentally appropriate science and math activities for young learners. But it's a little more difficult to picture what the T of technology and the E of engineering can and should look like during those foundational early childhood years around pre-K through 2nd grade. And so if you hear me say this phrase throughout my talk, the missing T and E of STEM, this is what I'm referring to. The difficulty that many educators face when trying to think up quality, developmentally appropriate activities to engage young children in this T&E content. But let's step back for a moment before we discover how we can engage kids with this content. What about why? Why do we care about the TNE in early childhood classrooms when there's already so many important things that teachers have to cover? Well, before I get into the literature and what the research says, I just want to share with you my own answer. When people ask me this question, this is what I share with them. So I tell them, you know what, it's just a good time. There's really no better answer than that. Any of you who have worked with young children know how curious they are about understanding the world around them at this age and how much they have a desire to understand how things work. And just like we try to teach young children about the natural world and how waves and weather patterns and wind work through science and not through magic, this is also the perfect time to begin teaching them about their human-made environment, so they don't grow up thinking that automatically opening and closing doors or automatic lights and water faucets work by magic. So kids at this age are asking us those endless why questions, how questions, and these are actually the exact questions that engineers and computer scientists need to ask every day. So I believe that young children have this inherent engineering mindset and that it's a beautiful time to capitalize on their natural curiosity about the world around them by engaging them in this content. Now, when we think about technology and engineering in school settings, it also becomes increasingly important when it comes to this issue of the digital divide. So the digital divide refers to the divide between people with access to quality technology and those without. So it's really an issue of the haves and the have-nots. And as educators, we can't always control what's happening at home. But we know that technological literacy, beginning at an early age, opens the door to many opportunities. And it's our job to make sure that all children have equal access to these opportunities, at least in school settings, even if we can't control what they have access to at home. And thinking about this, the long-term effects of TNE interventions, we know that in many STEM fields, in the technical STEM fields, particularly computer science and engineering, women and minorities are still very, very underrepresented in these career fields. And we've seen that by introducing children to TNE at an early age, they're less likely to act on these stereotypes later on in life. So the bottom line is that early childhood TNE initiatives really have the power to make long-lasting impacts on the lives of children and also later on in their adult lives. And these are all the benefits that we see long-term. But what about on an everyday level? What are some of the benefits that we see? Well, technology has the power to foster collaboration and teamwork. It doesn't need to just be a child sitting individually in front of a computer with headphones on. It has the ability to really spark creativity and imagination. So I really see the computer, the power of the computer and robotics and educational technology much, much more like a blank art canvas or a blank or an unsculpted wad of clay, much more so than like a television set. I see educational technology as having the power to spark creative imagination and be an outlet artistically for children. And finally, like I've already touched on, new technologies like robotics allow children to explore things they're curious about in their world, so they can learn how things like sensors or batteries or light bulbs really work through playing with these tools. And if you're curious about any of these big picture impacts that I'm telling you about, I'd suggest you searching out one of these two books written by one of KinderLab's co-founders, Dr. Marina Bears. Her first book is called Blocks to Robots, and her second book is called Designing Digital Experiences for Positive Youth Development. Now, in her second book, Dr. Bears presents two scenarios for playful learning. And the first scenario or the first environment is the playground. So let's all think back at maybe the last time you were at a playground. And let's sort of think about what types of behaviors, what types of learning and playing did you observe at the playground? Well, you probably observed right away there's a lot of physical play. There's a lot of gross motor and fine motor exploration. And maybe you remembered that children tend to be engaged with a lot of imaginative play, like making up their own rules to a game or doing some kind of dramatic play. You might also see that children are engaged with collaboration, or you might be remembering an incident where children had to troubleshoot social conflict and fights with their peers and with their friends. Of course, the playground is also a dangerous space at times. Kids fall and have skinned knees, or they bump their head. But what's most important about this space, I believe, is that it's a very truly child-directed play space. Parents and teachers tend to be on the sidelines watching and supervising and only intervening when truly necessary to resolve a conflict or for safety-related reasons. So let's contrast that play space with another one, the playpen. So when we think of the playpen, we really see quite the opposite environment. We see a much more solitary environment, and we see a much more adult-directed environment. So the adult is really the one that decides which toys go in, which books go in the playpen, and what materials the child would have to learn and play with. So it's a much more restricted space. So why do we even have the playpen? Well, it's certainly a safer space, and at times a much easier space to manage for the adult than the playground. And no one can argue that both playpens and playgrounds are necessary. But when we apply this metaphor to the tech world, what we see is that there are much, much more digital devices, apps, and games out there for young children that are playpen technologies. They're restrictive. They engage children as consumers rather than creators of a technological experience. Some of these are excellent playpen technologies that allow children to practice, basic math skills or letter sounds, but nonetheless, they're playpen experiences. And I think it's very important when we think of creating a well-rounded technological experience for young children that we keep our eye out for these technological playgrounds, and that although they might be more work, just like a trip to the playground is more work, and it can be at times more preparation for the adult, these playground experiences can be very powerful for young children. So here's two examples of what I think are great playground technologies. You may have heard of the Scratch Junior Programming app. It's a free coding application for young children on iPad and Android, where kids can make animations and stories and games. And of course, you already heard in my introduction that I've been working on the Kibo Robotics kit developed by KinderLab. And Kibo is the technology I'll be using as an example for the rest of my talk. So I love robotics for introducing young children to foundational technology and engineering concepts because it's really such a playful, hands-on, and collaborative medium. Now, Kibo was specifically designed for young users, ages 4 to 7, and it's even more collaborative because it's programmed without any screen time, just using interlocking wooden blocks. So I'll show you a brief demo of how Kibo works. So Kibo is constructed using motors and wheels that attach to the side of the robot, allowing you to create a robot that moves around in the space. It also comes with a light sensor, sound sensor, and distance sensor, as well as a light bulb. And as I mentioned, Kibo is programmed using wooden blocks. Each one has a barcode on it. So Kibo scans the barcode on each of the programming blocks one at a time in sequential left to right order, just like reading, and then the program is instantly saved on the robot. And one of my favorite things about Kibo is that it comes with a lot of art platforms and decorating spaces so that the child can really personalize and decorate the robot so that it looks and feels differently each time the child uses it. So Kibo is programmed using this block language. It contains 18 individual blocks, 12 parameters, and there's really no limit to what you can make your Kibo do once you start to master the different commands. And of course, it would take a whole other talk to explain to you what all of these blocks do. So instead, I'll tell you how I like to introduce what a programming language is in an early childhood classroom. So I often find it useful to liken a programming language to any language that you or I or the students in your classroom speak. So for example, while one student might speak Spanish or Japanese, I wouldn't understand that language. Just the same, Kibo doesn't understand if we talk to it in English or Chinese or Japanese. It only understands this programming language, and really what it understands are these barcodes. The pictures and the words are translations for us. And just like the English language has rules, like starting with a capital letter and ending with a punctuation mark, Kibo's programming language also has rules. You have to start with a begin block and end with an end block. And there are increasingly more complex syntactical rules to Kibo's language, and you could introduce each one at a time in a different class that you're teaching and find a way to liken it to languages that children are familiar with. We have developed Kibo over many years. The first prototype emerged in 2012, and all of our design decisions were made based on, 5, 10 plus years of research and development, working with around 600 children at the time that Kibo was first released, and over 100 educators, and really took all of their feedback into consideration when creating the final aesthetic design of Kibo and the functionality of Kibo to make sure it would be a developmentally appropriate playground technology. And what we found is very promising, that as young as pre-K, children are able to build and program a simple robot, that they're generally successful at mastering the functions of Kibo's different parts, such as, for example, Kibo's distance sensor. And they're able to also liken these sensors and these different parts to other sensors and mechanical parts that they see in the real world. And we found that as children get older, they're able to explore even more complex concepts with robotics. So beginning in first and second grade, we see children exploring things like repeat loops and conditionals. And what I think is the most interesting to observe in the classroom is that we see kids spontaneously exploring these things on their own, not even when explicitly taught by the teacher. So you might be more interested in the non-tech skills that kids might be gaining through technology like the Kibo robot. So what we see is that kids are also gaining fine motor skills through manipulating and building with robotic parts. They're problem solving and troubleshooting through different issues they're having when building and programming. And they're also practicing their sequencing ability. So I just want to stop and touch on sequencing briefly. It's a very important pre-math and pre-literacy skill that has to do with understanding a logical order and a logical sequence of events. And what we found is that after completing a robotics and programming curriculum, children in pre-K and kindergarten were significantly better at logically sequencing these stories. And I found that very exciting and very promising to see that these types of tech initiatives can have a lot of benefits across multiple learning domains. So what is this actually like in the classroom? What is this like for the teachers? And what is this type of learning like for the students? Well, a lot of it is learning through play. And especially if you keep in the back of your mind when designing your curriculum that playpen and playground metaphor, and you'll try to think of physical games and full class games and collaborative silly games so that children are really learning through this playground experience. It can also look a lot like learning through song and dance. So this is an example of one song that we made up in a classroom for children to reinforce the different parts of the Kibo robot. I'll play it for you now. But what's different here is that kids are learning through the design process. They're engaging with this engineering design process, and they're engaging with especially this idea of testing and improving and perseverance. And at times we call this hard fun. It's not always easy to get it right and get it to work, but the payoff is really big in the end. You know, you could liken this to learning to play a song on an instrument. It's easy fun to play the radio, but it's hard fun to learn how to play a song on the piano. And building and programming and engineering is also hard fun. And it's hard fun for the kids, and you know, you have to recognize it's also hard fun for the teachers. There's a learning curve, and there's a lot of perseverance that goes into it. So we've been talking about ways to use robotics like Kibo to address this T&E of STEM. But actually, what we've been doing is looking at STEAM, integrating the arts into STEM content. And a lot of times when educators or researchers think of STEAM in early childhood settings, they're thinking really of just the fine arts or the visual arts. They're thinking of just adding maybe an arts and crafts component to a robotics project, which I think is great, and I think kids love it. But I also think that definition limits the meaning of STEAM and the power of STEAM, because the arts can and should represent the full spectrum of the liberal arts, culture, music, language, religion, and it really can be a powerful integrative learning experience for children. So I wanted to end with showing you a few highlights from different STEAM curriculum and how this A of arts was interpreted, so that maybe you'll get some inspiration of curriculum you might want to try. So one of my favorite units is this unit called Dances from Around the World. Actually, we first developed this unit working with a school in East Boston that had a lot of kids from different backgrounds and cultures in their home. And so the teachers wanted to find a way to integrate an exploration of cultures with the robotics unit. So kids ended up learning and researching a particular dance and then building and programming their robot to represent that dance. So let me show you a few of my favorite robots. The first one is the lion dance. The next one is very much a group effort, multiple groups, multiple robots, the Ava Nagila dance. And we also have a salsa dancing robot. Another popular way I've seen the A of arts integrated is through social studies and a study of neighborhoods and community, because robots can actually be, mobile robots like Kibo are perfect for explorations of mapping. So in this school, they studied all about their community, and they programmed their robots to stop at different places in their community on these scaled maps that they created on the floor. So in the preschool classroom, they just programmed their robots to drive to their house or a friend's house. And in the second grade, they used sensors to make their robot stop at a particular place. So in this case, the school was near a train station. So this group has their robot stop at the train station. It goes under the bridge and it goes to the train. Robotics can also be used as a fun way to bring to life classic children's books in a way that's maybe a little more dynamic or exciting for kids than just a picture or a diorama might be. So in one school, they were reading the book Brown Bear, What Do You See? And they programmed their robots to drive around and visit all of the different animals and objects that the bear sees in the book. And in another classroom, they were reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar, one of my favorite children's books. And they programmed their robot to represent eating all of the different foods that the caterpillar eats in the book. And one of my favorite examples of STEAM and robotics in a classroom is this unit on the Iditarod. So there was a teacher who always taught the Iditarod race. This was her unit she taught every single year in her first grade classroom. And she really wanted to find a way to bring this curriculum to life and make it a little bit more spiced up, a little bit more of a dynamic unit for the kids. So the Iditarod is based on a historical event that happened in Alaska where sled dogs were going all the way across Alaska with a serum for diphtheria. But now it's also an annual sled dog race. So the teacher does a unit on both the historical context and watching the yearly race and tracking the dogs. So how she integrated robotics was to have the robots represent the different sleds and the mushers, the people who ride the dog sleds, and create a map of Alaska across the library space, and have the kids actually program their robots to work collaboratively to pass the serum from one dog sled to the next to make it all the way across Alaska. And it was such a fun, chaotic, and beautiful success that she does this every year now. They've been doing it for several years. Here's a little clip. And there are countless other ideas. You really are only limited by your own imagination and your own idea of what you want to teach in your classroom. Robotics can really just as easily be integrated with any subject matter, the same as pencils and paper can be. If you're curious about any of the curriculum units that I showed you today, you can actually find free versions of these and many other curricular units on this website, the Early Childhood Robotics Network. And if you join the website, you can actually it's free to join, and you can get periodic emails with new things that are happening in the world of ed tech, new opportunities for professional development, or new videos and things that are posted. So it's a very fun and useful resource. Another great resource, if you're curious to find out more about Kibo, you already saw, I think, in the chat panel, the main website, kinderlabrobotics.com, and we also have a resources website. So I can only very briefly show you Kibo, but on the Kibo Resources page, we have step-by-step tutorial videos, so you can really see everything that you can do with Kibo and learn how to do it in a really slow and step-by-step manner. Finally, for anyone, one last resource for anyone who is looking for more long-term professional development related to technology or robotics, specifically for young children, we're launching a new graduate certificate program this year, starting in fall 2016 at Tufts University. It's a one-year program, and it's blended, so it's online, predominantly online, and has a one-week in-person component in the summer. So we're actually accepting applications for the fall all the way up through August. So if you're interested, please check out this website, go.tufts.edu/ECT, to find out more. And I'm sure you have many questions. Before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to commend all of you for being here and taking your free time to listen to this webinar, and for understanding the importance of building technological literacy in young children, and seeing the importance of allowing children to understand the human-made world that they live in through developmentally appropriate technologies and technology curricula. And that we do have an important role as educators to address these underrepresented communities in STEM fields and to reduce this digital divide. And the way we really do that is by starting early, making it fun, and making it lively and engaging for all learners. So thank you so much. I think there is definitely time for any questions, should people have them.
Great, Amanda. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'll give you just a couple of moments to catch your breath, and then we'll take some Q&A from our attendees. So if you do have a question for Amanda, please feel free to submit it now through that questions box of GoToWebinar. We'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. And this webinar has been brought to you free today thanks to our sponsor, KinderLab Robotics. KinderLab Robotics is the creator of Kibo, a robot kit based on 15 years of child development research for 4 to 7-year-olds to build, program, decorate, and run their own robot. Created by Professor Marina Burrs at Tufts University, specifically for teachers, Kibo is used in 40 countries and proven to help kids learn STEM and get excited about it. KinderLab offers a suite of teaching materials that help integrate STEM elements into a wide range of curricula, including arts, cultural studies, and reading literacy. Now, Kibo offers creative, experiential learning and requires no screens, keyboards, computers, tablets, smartphones, or IT support. I also want to take a moment to pop back into the teacher learning community here at Simple K-12 and share with you, where you can find some additional resources if you'd like to learn more. Inside of the teacher learning community, you will see our course catalog. I'll go ahead and click on that. And then we scroll down here to our STEM category. We currently have 72 unique webinars specific to using STEM in your classroom and with your students. You can check out those on-demand webinar recordings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, wherever you can log on to simpleK12.com. Now keep in mind, you would need to have that full access membership to the teacher learning community here at Simple K-12. I can stay on for a few minutes after we do some live Q&A with Amanda, answer any questions that you may have about how to go back and watch the recording of today's session on demand, or how to print those certificates of completion to turn into your school or district for PD points or CEUs. Okay, Amanda, I did have quite a few questions coming in here. I'm going to try to consolidate these down a little bit. Okay, we had several questions about how to get Kibo, the kit, and how much does it cost?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So you can get the kit at kinderlabrobotics.com, this website link right here. You'll click on a tab called Store, and when you get there, you'll actually see a lot of different versions of the kit. The most basic kit starts at $229, and the full Kibo 18 kit that I was demonstrating to you with all of those blocks and parameters is $399. There's also classroom packages, and there's other support materials, bulk kits. So there's a lot of different options. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to tweet at us or email info@kinderlabrobotics.com. And someone from our team would be happy to help you decide what is the best kit for you, what's the best kit for your classroom.
Okay, great. Another question here came in from Jim. What is the recommended student to robot ratio?
That is such a good question, and it doesn't exactly have an easy answer. So in my opinion, I think, 1 to 2 children, maybe 3 children to 1 robot. There's a really good balance of roles. You can have someone decorating, you can have someone programming, you can have someone testing, and there are roles that you can easily swap through. And that is the ideal situation. And it is a collaborative tool, so it's definitely not something where we say the ideal is necessarily 1 robot to 1 child. That being said, I have worked with many classrooms that have had far fewer robots, up to 5 kids per robot, or using 1 robot per classroom, and the teacher does demonstrations and full group activities with them. So it really depends on what you want to do. You could also get fewer robots, and I've seen teachers create center time activities where children take turns. But in my opinion, the short answer to a complex question is 2 to 3 kids to 1 robot is the most ideal.
Okay, great, Amanda. I think we have time for one more question. Came in from Caroline. She says, what is the difference between the We Do program versus Kibo for elementary students? Are they compatible?
Okay, so I love WeDo, by the way. I think it's a great product. And I think of WeDo as the big sibling to Kibo. WeDo, it has a lot of small parts. You're building with Legos. This isn't necessarily something you'd want to bring into a pre-K or K classroom. Although I have seen it done, it can be very challenging simply from a fine motor standpoint. The other big difference with WeDo and Kibo is that Kibo is programmed just with those interlocking wooden blocks I showed you. WeDo is programmed using a graphical on-screen, on-computer program. So there is this element of screen time that is often a bit of an issue when it comes to parents and teachers working with young learners. So in that respect, I always see WeDo as the big sibling to Kibo. Kibo is a little bit simpler, all the parts are a little bit bigger, and they're really made for young learners ages 4 to 7. And after that, WeDo is a beautiful and perfect next step as kids grow out of Kibo. That's how I see them related.
Okay, great. Amanda, thank you again so much for a wonderful presentation. It's been a pleasure being here with you today, as always. I look forward to being here with you again for your future sessions.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me. It was nice to be here.
Thanks again, Amanda.